Happy Thursday, friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Walking Through Lent. I am so excited to help us continue walking through this very special church season together, where we are learning more about the season of Lent. We're learning more about our friend Jesus, and we're learning about how all of those things come together to help us learn more about ourselves and who we are. So thank you for joining us this week as we continue doing that together as a community and as a team and as a family. So this week we are going to be talking about storms. So we are going to do this in the same way we've been doing it. We're going to read some actual scripture from the Bible. We're going to talk about it, help bring that scripture to life. We're going to go through some discussion questions that will hopefully help the scripture make a little more sense to y'all, and you are welcome to discuss the questions with me here on screen, or you're more than welcome to pause and discuss these questions as a family if your family is nearby. And then there is a take-home activity that I think is pretty cool for this week, and we'll talk about that a little more, and I'll tell you how you can get access to that take-home activity. So let's jump in. Like I said, today we are going to be talking about storms. What about storms? I don't know. You're going to have to pay attention and put on your super best listening ears to find out. So today we are reading out of Mark. We are going to read Mark 4, 35 through 31. 35 through 41. So we are going to be doing Mark 4, 35 through 41. So this is a story about when Jesus was in a storm and how did Jesus handle being a part of a scary weather storm event. So, like I said, we are in Mark 4, 35 through 41. So let's read some truth together today. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So you guys, thank you for putting on your very best listening ears to hear that scripture today about Jesus calming a storm by just asking it to be calm. All he had to say was, "Peace, be still," and this wild ocean was still. That's a pretty cool trick, am I right? So let's talk about that a little bit together. So what are different kinds of storms we can think of, like weather, literal storms? We can think of rainstorms. There are snowstorms. Sometimes there's ice storms. There are windstorms where it's just way too windy outside. Sometimes storms can turn into something even a little bit scarier, like maybe a tornado, a hurricane, maybe flooding will happen. So there are so many ways, right, that we in our everyday lives see the power of weather. The weather is constantly changing, right? It is affected by literally the way the earth spins, the position of the moon, and how people are caring for the earth and our atmosphere. All of those things together make up the kind of weather we get. So we can predict the weather, but we never know for certain what is going to happen with weather. Weathermen do their very, very best to tell us what's going to happen, to use our radar, but it doesn't always come 100% true. So like I said, we can predict the weather, but we will never know for sure what might happen. Like, how many times have you stayed glued to the TV wondering whether or not it's going to snow and how much it's going to snow? Or have you ever stayed glued to the TV trying to figure out, is it going to rain this week? Or maybe is there going to be an ice storm? Is it going to get icy out there? And like I said, thanks to the news and science and radar systems, we can normally have a good guess if these things are going to happen. But even the people on TV that tell us the weather, even they have to wait and see what happens because weather can be unpredictable. So one thing that is forever certain is that there will always be storms of some kind. In our story today, Jesus told one storm it needed to be still, and the storm cleared out. Jesus did not stop all storms everywhere else for forever and ever, and that is good. Jesus just took care of that one storm that one time. So storms are essential for life on earth. Thunderstorms and storms like that are actually, even though they can be scary, don't get me wrong, but they are essential for our life on earth. Storms replenish the soil with water. Storms wash away decay and debris from nature. And some plants and animals depend on heavy storms to keep their environments safe and to keep their environments correct. So they depend on heavy storms for survival. So when Jesus silenced this one storm, way back a long time ago, he showed care and love for his disciples. He showed them that he heard their concerns and was willing to do what he could to show them love. Sometimes the kindest thing that we can do is just listen carefully to a friend's feelings. And if we can show compassion for a friend's feelings, it's almost like we are in their boat with them, the same way that Jesus was in a literal boat with his disciples and heard his disciples' concerns and was able to do something about it. When we become really good listeners to our friends, it's like our way of saying, we're in this boat with you, and hopefully we can help do something about the pain or the concerns you're having. So we can relate to what our friends are going through, whatever storm they might be facing. When we do not have the power to stop the storm that they are facing, we can sit beside them and we can share the boat. So when your family or close friends or people you love are facing a storm, you are all in a boat together, but not just with each other. You are also in that boat with God. So maybe Jesus isn't here to literally silence the storm for us, but the really cool thing that Jesus did promise for forever is that you never have to be in your boat alone. So that was today's little devotion for you guys for Lent. So next, let's go through our discussion questions. So one question, the first question I have for you guys, it was, what storms have you been together with or in as a family? So when you look at your family unit, whatever your family looks like, what storms do you feel like you've been through together as a family? I think we can all think of different examples. So basically when I say a storm that you've gone through together as a family, maybe there was a time when there was a literal storm that was really bad and scary and you needed your family's help to feel safe. Or maybe sometimes your life felt a little stormy and something bad or big was happening and it just gave you a lot of feelings. Like, I know a couple weeks ago, my mom was a little sick, and that kind of felt like a storm my family was going through together. We wanted to make my mom feel better. We didn't know how, and it was just hard. But what made it easier is knowing I wasn't going through this hard thing by myself. I had my family with me, and we were all going through it together. So that's what I mean when I want you to think about what's like a storm your family has had to go through. What's something maybe hard your family has had to face? Did you maybe lose a loved one and that was really hard on your family? There are all kinds of storms. So I want you guys to put on your very best thinking brains and think of a time that your family went through a storm together. And then I'm wondering, keep that example in your brain. How did you guys encourage each other? So we'll keep using the example of me with my mom. My dad was very stressed and was having a hard time because my mom was sick, so we kept encouraging each other. I was there for my dad. I was trying to make sure he was eating regularly, that he was getting to take breaks from taking care of my mom or helping take care of her. And I just encouraged him. I reminded him everything was going to be okay. I listened to his feelings, and he did the same for me. So I want you to think of that example in your head of when your family was going through a storm, and how did you encourage each other? What words did you use with each other to communicate? Did you listen to their feelings? Stuff like that is what I want you to think about. So then our next question is, if you had the power to stop storms, that's pretty wild if you would have that power to stop storms. So think about it. If you did have the power to stop a storm, how would you use that power? And how would you decide what storms to stop? So maybe in this case, let's think a literal storm. If you had the power to stop a storm, how would you use that power? Well, sometimes we see like really scary storms. Maybe on the news, you see like a hurricane or something that looks like it's going to be dangerous to people and hurt people. So maybe I would stop those storms. Like if a hurricane was getting a little too big, I'd be like, chill, stop. That'd be a nice power to have. How would you decide what storms to stop? I think that's what would help me decide. If a storm looked like it was gonna hurt people, I'd probably stop it. But I also understand why storms are good for the environment, so I wouldn't stop every storm, because like we said, they help the environment and like we need rain. But maybe the storms that looked a little too big, maybe I would stop those. I don't know. What storms would you guys stop? I'm very interested to get your thinking wheels turning, and I want to know, what kind of storms would you stop? So our next question is, how do you feel when you are facing a storm? So that means a literal storm, or how are you feeling when you're facing a really big problem? So I don't know about you guys, but I get anxious. My heart rate picks up. I get that weird feeling in my tummy. I get anxious when I am about to face a really big storm or a really big problem. I get anxious, and the only thing that really takes away a lot of my anxiety is talking to somebody in a healthy way and talking to Jesus and God about the way I'm feeling. So, what can you do to get help in a storm? So let's say you're facing a storm or a really big problem. What can you do to get help in that storm? I think there's many different ways you could get help in a storm. Like I just said, if it's something that's making you anxious, or it's giving you that kind of like feeling in your stomach, like you're just not feeling great about it, talk to God, talk to Jesus, talk about the way you're feeling. If you need to talk more, that's okay. Talk to an adult that you trust. Talk to somebody that feels safe to share your feelings with. Because like we talked about last week, having big feelings or feeling some type of way about facing a big storm in your life or a big problem, it is okay to feel some of the negative feelings that come with that. But what also matters is what you do with those negative feelings, and getting those negative feelings out of you and communicating them with a person you trust. So those are our discussion questions for this week. So this week's take-home activity, I think, is really cool, because like what we talked about today, Jesus knew God's Spirit was always with him, even in the middle of a scary storm. Trusting this promise helped Jesus respond to the disciples. He responded with peace and curiosity instead of responding with worry or fear. So storms can be scary, but have you ever wondered what happens inside a cloud during a storm? Because in this week's take-home activity, in this experiment, you are actually going to practice embracing the curiosity of Christ as you explore the science behind how clouds form. So this week's activity, we got an example of how to get to know Christ better, and we have an example of how to get to know science better. Those are both really cool things. So I encourage you to do this week's take-home activity. And how can you do this week's take-home activity? I'm so glad you asked. Pay attention to our family newsletter. It comes out on Thursday afternoons. Our take-home activities are uploaded onto our newsletter. All you gotta do is give it a quick click, and you have access to the activities for this week and a coloring page that goes along with this lesson, because who doesn't love to color? I sure do. So I hope that you will take some time to do this activity at home this week. I genuinely think it's a really, really cool one and has an opportunity to really help our minds and our hearts grow. So I am going to close us in prayer, and then I'm going to let you go enjoy the rest of your day. So the Lord be with you. And this is when you say, and also with you. God of the earth, you bring peace to chaos and calm to storms. How incredible are you? Thanks for always being with us in the sunshine, in the wind, or the rain. Fill us up with peace and curiosity as we sit with those we love. Amen. So you guys, remember, if you want to do this week's activity, you can find it in our newsletter. Beyond that, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. I hope you make good choices. I hope you remember who and whose you are. Hopefully I'll see some of you this Sunday in Children's Chapel. And I just hope you know how loved you are and how much you matter to every single person here at St. Francis, no matter where you are or where you're watching this from. So have a wonderful week. Get outside, enjoy the weather, and I will see you next week for another episode of Walking Through Lent. Bye, guys.